Welcome to Life List, a birding podcast.
Hello, everybody. I'm Alvaro Jaramillo with Life List, a birding podcast. I'm here with George Armistead. Molly can't be here with us today, but George, why don't we get right into it? And, we're going to talk finches today. Well, we're probably going to talk more than finches, but why don't we get into it right and have you introduce our our panel. I was going to say our panel. I've been listening to so many of these political things these days. That was like,
Tis the season.
it's the season. So go ahead, George.
Yeah, well, we have two guests we are very excited to chat with today. We've been talking about this for a while, so excited to have on both Lillian Stokes and Matt Young. Lillian Stokes is an award-winning author and photographer who's produced 35 Stokes guides with her husband Don, selling over 5 million copies, including the best-selling Stokes Field Guide to the Birds of North America and the Stokes Field Guide to the Birds of Eastern and Western regions, the Stokes Beginner's Guide to Birds, and other Stokes nature guides. Lillian was a producer and co-host of 2 national PBS birdwatching TV series seen by 40 million viewers. Other achievements include the Federal Duck Stamp Judge, Partners in Flight National Conservation Award, Lifetime Achievement Award, Kappa Kappa Gamma. Lillian is on the board of directors of Humana Hawk Migration Association of North America and a former member of the board of directors of New Hampshire Audubon. Awesome to have you here, Lillian, and also your co-author, Matt Young, who has been with us before. He possesses the gift of gab, that is for sure. He is the founder and board president of the Finch Research Network. Matt has also worked in the field of social work, working with special needs populations at William George Agency for 12 years. Additionally, Matt worked at the Cornell Lab across 15 years, where he worked on golden-winged warblers, voices of Hawaiian birds, the Merlin ID app, and was the project lead on the lab's first eruptive finch survey in 1999. Widely known as a preeminent authority on finches of North America, Matt has written species accounts for finches for various breeding bird atlases, the Birds of the World accounts, and published several papers on finches and the red crossbill vocal complex, everybody's favorite. We are thrilled to have both of you here. Thanks, Lillian, and thanks, Matt, for being here.
Yeah, welcome, both of you.
Thank you so much. We're thrilled to be here also.
Yeah, thanks a lot, guys, for having us again. For having me on again.
Yeah. I mean, it's really great to have, there's so many questions that come up in terms of the finches and the book, but let us know a little bit about the book itself. It is officially now out, or is it now, about to be published? Because I have a copy. So for me, it exists. It's real. But, how about the listeners here?
Well, for the listeners, it's about to come out. It's going to come out September 17th. We're super excited. I feel like a kid at Christmas. I can't wait. Santa is coming. I said that to somebody and they say, "Oh, wait, you made the toys." And then I thought, "Oh, wait, maybe I am Santa." But anyway, it's going to be thrilling, and I really can't wait to share what I think is one of my best books I've ever done with my wonderful co-host with the wider birding community.
Yeah, I mean, it's impressive how many books you have been involved in. And I gotta say that one of the earlier books you did when I was a teenager, I had one of the bird behavior. There was, and I remember very distinctly reading there that the Canada goose, the male and the female, had a different call. And which now I've known that for years now, but you were the first to tell me that. And then I thought it instilled this whole thing of like, wow, one of the most common birds that I see all the time. I didn't know that until now. And I thought behavior and looking at things in more care, listening to them and thinking about them in a way that was more than just, ticking them off or identifying them. I think I first kind of got that inkling from one of your books. So thank you so much.
Well, you're welcome. And I think you've hit on something. Like I said, I've had a really long career spanning almost 40 years now. And some of the early stuff that I was involved in was the bird behavior guides that where the approach was to take people deeper, make them more appreciative, have them understand the lives and behavior and complexities and mysteries of the birds around them. And that's kind of what we started off with. And Matt is has been up until recently a social worker. And I actually, a lot of people don't know this, in my background, I started off as a psychiatric social worker. And then I went up to a mountaintop and met a bald eagle. And back in those days, bald eagles were really rare.
That's
and
right.
And it turned my life around 180. So I started back, in the world of behavior, and essentially my entire career has been about connecting people more deeply, making them understand the complexities, even about things that are very common. And I think that's one of the things I brought to this latest book, which is the Stokes Guide to Finches of the United States and Canada that Matt and I just did. And it wrapped everything all into one, both all the identification, all the life histories, all the deeper dives, the behavior. I like to say that I brought the art and science of finches to this new guide.
Obviously, I mean, you guys probably know this, or maybe you don't, but I mean, this is like, Lillian helped bring this life work, this group that I've been fascinated with for now 20, almost 30 years, to life. And, it's been a great honor to work with her on this. And, that whole theme, we both share that ethos of connection to birds and nature is just incredibly, important for just everybody to have from a mental health perspective. Again, it's that ornithotherapy kind of thing that we talked about last time.
Yeah.
Guys. Yeah, it's very important to both of us.
Totally. I mean, I think my whole career and, with Don has been to bringing to the largest group possible, reaching the widest audience with the messages of connecting people to the power and wellness, and to birds and nature, and helping them understand them more, go deeper, and want to conserve them. So that's been really my life's work. But I remember when Matt and I first got together to do this book, which is sort of an interesting story. People say, well, why did you do a book on finches, and why now? And one of the things was, in some way, I didn't have a choice. So a little bit of the backstory was that I lived in New Hampshire at the time, and a group of red crossbills came down to the Harris Center for Conservation in Hancock, New Hampshire in August of 2020. And my friend Mead Cadeau, the former director, called me up and said, Lillian, the crossbills have come. Well, I ran over there. I recorded them. I photographed them. I listened to them. I looked at them every day. I was just mesmerized. And of course, one of the things that, as everybody out there who deals with crossbills knows, one of the things you do is you record crossbills so that you can know where they come from, because they're like tribes who live in different areas of the country. They each have their own unique call type. They just speak their own language. And so I did that. And who did I send my recordings to? But somebody said, well, send them to Matt at Cornell. So I actually sent them to the wrong Matt for the first time. Matt and then I finally connected to the right crossbill guy, my co-author, Matt Young. And then, we got together and we said, oh my God, there's no guide for finches. We have to do something like this. And then I remember Matt, I used to send tons of recordings, and I'd bombard him with all kinds of questions. And he kind of said, I have to do a Zoom with this woman. So we got together on Zoom. And I remember in the first Zoom, Matt, and, you were talking about being a social worker. And I go, wait, I was a social worker too. And we realized, we connected on so many levels, both the birding level and the social work level, and caring about people and caring about connections, and then caring about teaching. So that was a great start to the whole journey, this long journey we've been on, and that finally people will hold this book in their hands come September 17th.
So, I have the book in my hands, and and probably somebody's sitting there going, I have a U.S. Canada field guide. Why do I need a finch book? Because well, this is why. This book has all sorts of information about habitats. There are multiple beautiful photographs, sometimes of different ages and sexes of different things. The evening grosbeaks, they tell you that there's different call types, just like crossbills, well, not just like, but similar to, and they delineate what those look like, where they're found, all of this stuff that you can't get in a field guide. And, there's weight, folks, there's more. It's like they're all the vagrants too, all sorts of cool vagrants. And also interesting to me, Hawaiian, the honey creepers, which are finches. And I want to ask you about that a little bit later too. But it is just a wealth of information here that you cannot find anywhere else. And it's fun to read. And even, of course, finches are really closely associated with the backyard and the winter bird feeding. There's a set of a bit of information on how to do that, and which seeds this different finches like. So I think apart from being a really beautiful book, it's a really creative book, the way you've done this. So I commend you on it. It's like just, um, it's a cool, and I like finches. So you had me at finch already, but
Yeah,
but
so
even if I didn't like finches, I think I would like this book.
That's awesome.
Alvaro knows Ron Pitaway from back in the day, Lillian.
Oh yeah,
So I think he kind of hooked him a little bit there.
yeah,
So,
yeah,
but I mean, our goal was to kind of hopefully write something for the backyard birder, but also the expert that wants to do the deep dive. So hopefully we kind of pulled that off. I think we did like you said, it took some creative thought to kind of pull that off.
yeah. The
Well,
fanatic, we could call him the finch
Yeah.
fanatic. Finch fans here.
from the fledgling finch fan to the finch fanatic, for the person who wants to get it deep dives into the crossbill call types, and you're trying to decide whether you have a type 2 crossbill type that's kinked or unkinked recording. It's just phenomenal. But you don't even really have to know much about finches to pick up this book, and that was the enormous challenge that we met, and then I'm very pleased about. It's everything finch for everyone finch, whether you're a total novice. I know my neighbor next door who barely can recognize a goldfinch. She thinks in the winter they all disappear, when in fact, as we know, they change. They're the only finch that changes their complete molt twice and looks different in winter. They look gray brown. Everyone says, where'd they go? So she said, well, I'm just going to read, I don't know much about this other stuff, but I'm just going to read the quick takes. And the quick takes are creative essays that I did that's an introduction to each finch species. And they range from, humorous to stories about me finding finches to personality profiles. And they're kind of a snapshot in time of personality. A dive into what about this finch, what makes it unique. And then we have, the amazing crossbill section, which is a book within a book. It's what, Matt? We have almost 40 pages devoted to crossbills alone.
I think so.
Everything about every call type. We almost treat each of those like an individual species account. And of course, Matt did this amazing finch charts on their foraging. You want to talk a little bit about that, Matt? The foraging charts?
Yeah, so I mean, they're kind of meant as a guide for the birder, field ornithologist to get a handle on. People have for years been asking me, like, how do you always find crossbills so easily, Young? And I said, it's all about knowing what's on the menu. All about knowing what's on the menu at what time of the year. So if how I kind of put those together, and they're really just a guide, it's I poured through the literature. You have to learn your cone ripening phenologies and your masting crop cycles and what species holds their seed in the beginning of the cone cycle year, which generally starts about July 1 when the cone crops are developing and ripening, starting to ripen. On those soft cone conifers, which I think I talked to you a little bit about this last time, with spruces and hemlocks and larches, they kind of ripen right away. And then the harder pines, the red pines, the lodgepole pines, the jack pines, the ponderosa pines, they hold the seed longer into the year. So when I was, when I first moved back to New York and I was going, all right, how could I find red crossbills? I dove into this at a deep, deep level. And it was just a matter of like, all right, let's look through the literature. Which ones erupt where? Which ones feed on what? Which ones kind of have bigger bills that can deal with, a lot more species than the littler billed ones? And that's really what that is. Those foraging charts are thousands of hours of observing crossbills feeding, knowing the cone ripening phenologies, the mast and crop cycles for each of the conifers, and then just knowing the overall kind of distribution, the historical distribution of the call types. And that's how I kind of laid those out. I mean, it took a lot of work. I tweaked those and tweaked those and tweaked those and tweaked
Yeah.
those to the point where they finally said no more tweaking.
No more tweaking.
Yeah.
But
That's right.
I mean, it's interesting to me. Like you can see something like type 3 red crossbills, and you've got the west and the east separated, of course, because the trees don't migrate, right? And so if the birds are going to a different place because they have to because their regular cone crops are not available, they switch to different. And you can sort of see here what are the main species of trees that they likely to be feeding on at a certain time of year. I mean, this is I could have never looked this up. I mean, you had to have somebody who had been thinking about this for 10,000 hours plus put this together for me to enjoy. And now it's easy. I'll be finding crossbills more readily, I think. So
That's the goal.
that's really cool.
That's the goal. We
Yeah,
want
thanks.
everybody to find them. Yeah, the charts tell you, what food, which crossbill is eating in what part of the country when. So
Wow.
they're part of that amazing book within a book for the red crossbill chapter.
Yeah. And
Now,
so
crossbills always break rules, so I want everybody to know that.
Yeah.
It's not 100% foolproof, but that definitely will give you a guideline on where to look and when to look for what.
So one question that, came up, I think George and I were talking about this a couple of weeks ago is the fact, or maybe even when we were talking to you originally, Matt, it's like the book was being put together as the AOS suddenly lumped the red poles. So we went from multiple red poles. Yeah. Yeah. to like just now red pole. So how did you guys deal with that kind of? Did you have an inkling that it could happen? Yes. Did you have how'd you? I mean, I have the book, but explain sort of how you put it together in a way that makes sense.
I think we all got attached to hoary redpole. It's been tough to bid it farewell.
So did I. we of course. No one knew this was coming. These are the challenges of being an author of a book when, in fact, before your eyes, things are constantly changing with birds. Part of it is, of course, some of these birds are going to be renamed. We can talk about that later. But in terms of the lumping, so we knew something. We knew there was a proposal. We knew it was in the works. Here we had just done this very detailed chapter on hoary redpole and common redpole. Every way you could possibly tell them apart, multiple first level of, clues, second level clues. I had, as part of the quick take, written about my encounter finding a hoary redpole during the pandemic, because during the pandemic, what occurred also, people may or may not realize this, forces came together. So you had this massive superflight eruption of all 8 eruptive finches out of the boreal. They had their own crisis. At the same time, humanity was having our own crisis of COVID. Everybody is going inside. They're turning to, outside to nature as a nurturing anchor to help them deal with their anxiety. And lo and behold, all these sort of finches appear. So I was determined to find all 8 eruptive species and photograph them. I had never photographed a hoary redpole. So that's my quick take story. And some of the quick takes are a little bit of what it can be like to be birder, or it's sort of a role model. What is the excitement? So here I go. The whole thing's down. The whole thing is there. We have 2 beautiful chapters and we know what's coming. And so what we did was we handled it by labeling them as red pole complex. And
All
Matt,
right.
you want to say more about how we handled that, the red pole complex?
Yeah, I mean, like Killian said, we knew something was coming down, so we were like, all right, how can we kind of get to a midpoint with this, with the idea of knowing that it's likely they're going to be lumped. So we mentioned them, we labeled them as red pole complex, and now they're just subspecies of,
Right.
Acanthus flammea. And that's basically how we covered them. I mean, they're still separate, individual chapters for common red pole and hoary red pole. But we said, all right, we'll label these as the red pole complex. So that way, people can still do the deep dive if they want to and do the ID down to the subspecies level, which I really hope people continue to do that, because it is it's just a great complex. I mean, I'm never going to get sick of looking at red poles and just looking at the variability within red poles. But, lumping them together, which we kind of knew was coming, it made a lot of sense, given the genetic work that's out there at this point. I mean, I would love to still see in the sort of mating study in the tundra, to see exactly what they're doing up there. But I mean, for now, I think it made a lot of sense to
I think you make a good point too, though, that the hoary red pole doesn't cease to exist. It's still there. You can still go watch it, bird it. Let's put it that way. You just can't count it on your list in the same way that you could before, but it's still there. So it's like we haven't lost anything. It goes in a different pile. Let's put it that way.
Feels like he got a demotion, but but he's still there, right? He's still there.
You win
Well, it's still a distinct taxon.
Right.
I mean, it's still a distinct taxon. So I mean,
and there are other fun taxa to look for within that group as well. So
absolutely. Basically, the book went to the printer before the decision was made by the AOS. So that's how we covered our butts, basically calling it the red pole complex. But it's actually a really fascinating story about how they finally decided what the deal was, and we talk about that in the chapter as well. We talk about the two studies by Mason and Taylor in the beginning, and then Funk and Mason and the rest of them very recently that did the genetic work of underpinnings and basically found out that the birds that are the palest share something called an inverted supergene. And the genes in the inversion are the genes that control how the red poles look. Birds that have that inversion are much paler, with smaller bills. Birds that don't have that inversion are the ones that we have in the past called common red poles. And then you have the lesser red pole, which is an even darker bird. Those genes aren't the only genes that control plumage and coloration. There are some other genes as well, and the lesser red pole has those genes. So it's kind of fascinating, hiding in plain sight, And the other interesting part is that the birds that are the pale ones that breed together, that are up in the high Arctic, have a advantage by looking pale. So the sort of the ecology and the habitat play a part in determining how they look, because if you're up there and it's all white, you don't want to stand out and be bright and shiny and have the predator see you and be bright red. You better be pale.
Yeah.
Did you pick up how the whole study started at my house?
That's right.
In Cortland. I don't know if you saw that or read that in the quick take. I had this crazy flock at my house in Cortland, and then Mason and Taylor came over, and that's how it all kind of started. Was they came over, captured some birds, and and one of the they had first, I think the first proposal, I think they proposed for them to be lumped there on that first paper, and it didn't pass. And then they went and expanded the study to include more nominate birds from Greenland and Iceland and stuff in the northern part of the range. So it's hopefully
it's
maybe
all your fault then.
Maybe the Finch Research Network, or maybe somebody will step up and do an assortative mating study, a little more detailed level. But who knows? It's hard to say. It's not easy. It's not easy to study finches in the Arctic.
No, it's expensive too. Get
Yeah.
people up. Yeah, I mean, but I do want to go back to a set of finches that George and I really have spent some time with, even as together co-leading trips to Hawaii. And tell us tell us a little bit about why you thought it was important to include them,
I'm
because I
so
think a
glad you
lot of
did too.
people wouldn't have. Let's put
Yeah.
it that way. I think some authors would have said, well, they're not what people think of as finches, so they're out. But what are your thoughts about why you included them, which I think is good?
I think
Yeah,
it's
well,
great.
thank you. And I remember Matt and I having those conversations, and we felt strongly, absolutely. First of all, those finches are going to be so pissed off on us if we leave them out, because they're finches too,
Yeah.
and they're part of the United States and Canada. And secondly, they have the most amazing stories, and they're very worthy of having their stories told because they face a lot of problems which are making them more endangered. And they one of the biggest problems is avian malaria. As climate change affects the Hawaiian Islands where these finches are, they the slopes where they live, the upper elevations get warmer and warmer and warmer, allowing mosquitoes to come upslope, and they carry this dangerous disease that can wipe out these finches, these rare finches, endemic finches, the endemic honey creeper. So we tell the whole story of Hawaii, how they got there, and then we talk a lot about who they are, what they are, and what's being done. Matt, you want to talk a little bit about what's being done and
Well,
and
it's a
why it's so
conservation
important?
crisis is really why we wanted to include them. I mean, a lot of people unfortunately don't know, I mean, if the most amazing adaptive radiation, really, this flock or multiple flocks of a rose finch from Europe lands there and then adaptively radiates out to 55 plus species. And, they end up going on to evolve to have bills that a lot of them don't even look like a finch or what a lot of us grew up to think a finch was,
Hmm.
or, with the conical bill for cracking seeds. Some of them are nectivorous. And so, yeah, we just felt like we really wanted to bring attention to that and also bring attention to the Birds Not Mosquitoes initiative that the American Bird Conservancy is heading up over there. It's a multi kind of organization or agency initiative to try to do whatever they can, or what any of these organizations, including even the Finch Research Network, to help preserve what is left over there. And so, they're trying to, there's this Wabakia program that they have where they're trying to basically, use the males and give them an incompatible Wabakia bacteria, and when they mate, then when they're released and mate with the females, though the eggs will be sterile. And if that continues over time, the populations of these mosquitoes that are biting uh, the various honey creepers over there, is really leading to this incredible decline in almost all of the species,
Yeah.
except for really, it's just the Amakihi is really the only one that seems to be building up resistance. I think Apapani might be, there's some inkling of maybe there's some resistance there. But really, the avian malaria situation is
Yeah, and
just
these mosquitoes only mate once. It's one of those lucky coincidences that they mate once and then the female goes and lays the egg. So if she's mated with this male that's it's sterile,
Right.
she has no idea. She goes and, like you said, lays
yeah.
these eggs that
It's
are
perfect.
sterile too. So we're lucky we have that one bit of biology in our favor, right? If there were
Yes.
multiple matings, it wouldn't work. Well, and I hope it does work, right? That's the other.
The clock
Absolutely.
is
Yeah,
ticking. It
the
Yeah,
seems
we're
clock is
like.
working on it.
ticking.
It's basically mosquito birth control, and you're right. The clock is ticking, and there are releases that have gone on, and they're monitoring it, and they're seeing it, and they're planning a lot more. So, less fingers and toes crossed. Hope that
Yeah.
this is really will be a big boost to helping these endangered, beautiful Hawaiian finches.
Yeah. And you can go to for listeners, you can go to birdsnotmosquitoes.org to learn more about this, to help, how you can help this. You can find it on the American Bird Conservancy site as well, as Matt mentioned.
And it's going to be an ongoing program, so they're going to continue to need support at all levels to try to save what, the species that could be saved. We're down to 16 now. So
and the akikiki, they just captured the last wild ones, right? Like in the last couple of weeks, I think.
Yeah, it's functionally extinct in the wild at this point. But they do have a captive program going on. So yeah, it's kind of all hands on deck kind of approach here at this point to try to do what we can. Again, an amazing group, really. It's just an amazing adaptive radiation compared to the Galapagos tanagers now.
Oh, yeah, which are I mean, I don't want to offend Alvaro because
exactly.
But yeah, I mean, you look at like the mamos and the the one that I don't even know if I'm saying it correctly, but it's like it is kind of a finch like one, the Ula I Hawani, like that one. It was like
excuse me, can you say that again?
Yeah, I don't know if I can say it again, but that one looks amazing. Even now the ones on Maui that are still there, the parrotbill, is that the Kiwiuki?
Kiwikiu.
Yeah, and then and the kohe. I mean, those exist and are finches is just pretty mind-blowing.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah. I mean, Palila is the only one that really looks like what we would
maybe
think
lays
of
on
a traditional finch, and lays on finch too.
Yeah.
But then you got Akia Pulao, which has these two bills working, the upper and the lower mandible kind of working in unison, but doing different things. Yeah, it's like woodpecker on one bill, and then the other one scoops it out.
Yeah,
right. And they can both be the same length too.
I can imagine your editor, coming up on the Hawaii section and going, "Oh, these names, and all the little, little dashes and this and that you have to put in there."
That's right.
The Aquinos.
They did a fantastic job with that, by the way. We just relied on it went through multiple rounds of copy editing. We relied on the copy editors to make sure every time any of those Hawaiian words were mentioned, they were spelled, correctly. So, but you're right. The koe, that looks like a punk rocker, and just amazing birds. It has their own Darwin's Finch-like story, but it's a totally different story written at a different time and a different place. And
more colorful.
They're good looking.
A different result. They're pretty amazing.
Yeah, and the Palila, like that one, is another one like the Akikiki that's like it's like, I mean, I think it's almost not findable in the wild hardly anymore.
Right.
Like,
at least in the main places. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm really not sure. That's not really even a malaria thing, potentially. I mean, I guess it somewhat has to do with that, but it's a Mamani specialist. So it's at high elevation too. Yeah. So, it's interesting. All of them, none of them are doing great. So
George and I, when we used to tour there, it was a while ago. I don't remember what the years were, but some of these species were still really quite common when we started.
We never missed Palila. We saw it every single year. And
that's on the cover of the book, by the way, the Palila. So people may not know this, but on the cover of the Finch Guide, there's 7 finches, and one of them is the Palila. It's a very beautiful bird, beautiful yellow coloring, more of a finch-like, but a sort of a chunkier bill. And we deliberately put it there with a little button saying that it includes the finches of Hawaii. But you guys are lucky, really, that have seen, that you were able to see these birds when they were still.
I was able to see the Akikiki twice.
Oh, wow.
And Alvaro, when we used to do the trips, we would drive up and have the akeke, right at the picnic area there, which is pretty unthinkable.
It's a yellow bird with a little black mask, and it's a beautiful little bird that it's kind of.
Loxops,
I would say, I would say it's cross-billish because it has a little bit of a cross in it.
Yeah,
and it opens up buds, right, rather than cones, right? It's opening up little buds, and it's like once a crossbill is a crossbill, I guess, or whatever. There's some genes there to develop
for
these
folks
funny
who may not
bills.
know, Loxia is the genus for crossbills, and Loxops is the genus for the akeke, which they both have cross mandibles.
Sounds like a Dr. Seuss thing, Loxops or something.
That's right.
Yeah. So, go ahead, George. Go
I was
ahead.
going to say one more interesting thing about the Palila is that it actually sued the state of Hawaii. There is a lawsuit from 1979 called Palila versus the Hawaii Department of Land and Natural Resources. You can look that up for more information, but it's just an unusual situation there where a bird is suing the state.
Yeah. So, in the book we have the chapter on the honey creepers, but then we cover it, in the research and conservation section. We cover again the whole birds not mosquitoes and what's going on there, and then obviously we also cover the evening grosbeak project, rosy finch project, and then also some kind of broader Fringillidae research questions in the research and conservation section. So for those out there, we cover the main breeders, then there's the vagrants, and then as we just been talking about the honey creeper section, and then there's some additional chapters, one on feeding and attracting finches, another one on historical eruptions, and another one on research and conservation.
If I could ask you both a question, and maybe this is putting you on the spot too much, but if for somebody who's relatively new to birds and birding, what makes a finch a finch? How do as a family, what distinguishes the Fringillidae from? And I realize it's a diverse family. Just the honey creepers alone are diverse, much less the ones we have in North America. But how might you lay that out to the layperson?
There's no easy answer to that now. I mean, it used to be we grew up with the morphological species concept that a bill with a bird with a conical bill for cracking seeds was kind of what we all learned what a finch was. But then you have now with the genetics that have kind of showed these incredible adaptations that now have bills that don't look anything like what we grew up knowing a finch to be. So I don't think that question's easy anymore. I don't think with the genetic work that's going on and the associations being made at this point, I don't think we can kind of ask that simple question anymore.
Might be just genetics, and that they mostly are seed eaters.
Mostly are seed eaters, but they're
protein
in the temperate zone, because when you get down south, you have those euphonias and and all that. Euphonias, chlorophonias.
Some of the best looking finches out there. Yeah.
Well, I think too that again, this book we do tackle that question, by the way, right off in the book. Well, what makes a finch? And as Matt said, it's not so much how birds look anymore. It's what the genetics are that relate these birds, and that's true. Across all the birds, really, we're learning more and more and more about genetics. I mean, even the stuff about the super gene and the lumping of redpolls. So it's a different kind of question, but. When I think of, what makes a finch, and as I wrote the book, I used to think about, well, what's it like to be a finch? If you were a finch, what were the biggies going on? And one would be togetherness, and another would be movement. And finches are highly flock birds. I mean, if you look at your goldfinches at your feeders, or I'm looking at house finches all day long at my feeders, and you realize how in tune they are, how much they look at one another, how much they stay together. And it's true across even the more uncommon finches, such as the rosy finches, and certainly the red crossbills and things like that. And the other thing is movement. Finches move, especially in the eastern part of the country where a lot of the bigger eruptions, more movement occurs. And in some cases, because they breed in the boreal and food is erratic up there, they've had to adapt. You think of crossbills being the ultimate nomad. They've had to adapt to moving with your flock, because basically it's either move or starve. So then how do you do that? I used to be fascinated when I again, the very beginning of this book, when I look at these crossbills at the Harris Center, and I think, oh my God, Matt told me, well, you have a type 1, a type 2, a type 3, and a type 10, which now is actually a type 12. And I thought, my God, they're coming from all across the country. How do they know how to get here? Why did they choose here? And it has to do certainly with their food, but it has to do with the joint decisions they make all the time. I mean, even things like white-winged crossbills, well, how do they decide how to move? It's certainly they watch one another when they're feeding. They're on a big Michelin 4-star tree, and they're all, don't talk with your mouth full. They're all happy. I say, don't talk with your mouth full. We're having a great time. And then, it gets depleted, or the thing isn't a very good tree. They don't have enough food for them to reproduce when they need it, or for them to survive, food profitability. So they decide to move on. In red crossbills, it's chittering, and in this white-winged crossbills, they start talking to one another more, and they go, man, we got to get out of here. So they have to assess and move, and they're staying with their flock. So again, it's being a finch is all about movement and very much together and tight coordination. You look at the crossbills and how I used to watch them, and they would just look at one another. They would all arrive. They'd all be chittering together. And then suddenly it's like somebody gave an alarm call. They would all fly off together. So I've always thought about it sort of from the bird's point of view, what it would be like to be a finch.
They're social, I mean, they're flocking and they're always in numbers. And, the beautiful thing is some of them are common garden variety that we see every day in our backyards. Almost everybody has one or two species they're going to see. And then there's these, boreal ones. I was just up north with Tyler. We made it up to about 50 degrees north, Tyler Orr, finch forecaster. We were up 50 degrees north latitude in Ontario. And it was interesting to see white-winged crossbills as we drove around northern Ontario at different stages in nesting. Some were actually already feeding young, and some were just starting to gear up singing. Yeah. So it was kind of interesting to watch that.
I think it is cool to contemplate finchness with your own backyard house finches. Because, for example, I have, let's say, Buick's wrens. I have white crowned sparrows in the backyard. But during the breeding season, there's one pair, right? One pair that's hanging around the backyard, and they're territorial. But the house finches are always here in numbers. Even when they're breeding, they are willing to put aside their, they could be territorial near the nest and singing and so forth. But when the food's available, like at a feeder, they'll be together 20, 30 of them in the summer. And you think that is unusual for a bird. Most birds, even the bush tits, and we think of them as like big crowd of them. Breeding season comes and they all separate out to their little, pairs. But the finches stay friendly.
I think you've hit on something. And, we cover a lot of behavior in the book as well. I did a lot of work on the behavior sections because, again, remember, I came from a background of bird behavior. And what's interesting is that, we think of things like chickadees and cardinals, and they have a territory, and the male sings and attracts a female. In the case of cardinals, the females sing too. And by the way, a lot of female finches sing, and that needs more study. But what happens with finches are, rather than coming in and having one territory, sometimes they do a bit, but a lot of times they're grouped together, or they're semi-colonial, or, they breed and they kind of tolerate one another fairly closely, but then they might also leave and go to some other place. So a male in courtship may guard a space around the female rather than just a territory, a defined territory, like a quarter acre or something like that, or a half an acre like a cardinal might. So he's guarding the female because they have to come in, they arrive, they're more interested in mating, just keeping with their mate or guarding their mate. And then they will have a nest, and then they may leave. Often it's the male that leaves to go and find more food elsewhere. And again, look at their food source. It's all over, or it's ephemeral, or it's a good patch of dandelions here, so they all come in, or it's your feeder, so they all wind up there. And then the females are sitting on the nest, and a lot of times they sit, and 90% of the time with goldfinches, they're sitting on the nest, and the male is feeding them for 2 weeks. So, he better be good about finding food and coming in. But it's
Right.
a lot less different kind of social system for a lot of them than you think of as our standard, cardinal or other types of territorial birds.
Yeah. No, that is neat. Another thing that pops into my mind, my friend from Ontario, actually, you mentioned Ontario, Peter Burke was around, and we were out in the front yard, and he heard this bird go over and goes, "Hey, is that a red crossbill?" And I said, "No, that's a house finch." And he said, "What? That doesn't sound like a house finch." And I said, "I know." I said, "Here, they sound like a lot of different things." And unlike in Ontario, where he thought that they were a little bit more, less diverse in their sound, I said, some of them sometimes sound a little bit like hooded orioles. Sometimes they sound. And then he said, "Do you think that house finches they could be coming from a different place, and maybe the house finches all have different?" And I thought, you know what? They're probably learning their calls. That's why there's some variation. But I'd never thought about it. Have you considered, or had you heard this house finch variation continent wide, or is this a new thing we're onto here? Some brand new thing. We'll have to add a chapter to your book.
It's in the book,
It's in the
actually. At
book.
least the song dialects.
All
They
right.
have kind of different dialects, as Lillian can speak more about the song dialects. But
Exactly.
the flight calls don't seem to change that much. But there is some variation there because it's they're passerines, they're learning it.
I'm
So,
I'm
but
gonna
anyway,
I'm
go
gonna
ahead.
have to record some of these and then send them off to you, and you'll go, "Oh my
Yeah.
gosh,
Oh
maybe
my
they
God.
do vary."
Maybe there's a call type in house finches. Well, the whole story of house finches, again, in the quick take, I lay out the whole story of the Hollywood finch. So
Yeah.
people don't realize this. The house finches in the East were not always here. In the 40s, 1940s, they were massively imported. And even before that, from the West, they were caught and captured and sold as pet birds. So in about, I think it was 1940, some guy in Long Island or Brooklyn walked into a pet store. I think his name was Fleischer, and saw a sign, Hollywood finches for sale. And he goes, "Wait a minute, those are house finches from California. What are they doing selling them? This is a no-no." And then, one thing led to another, and there was a big investigation, and the pet trade was shut down. So what happened was they opened the doors, let the house finches out, and lo and behold, in the 40s and the 41 and 45, suddenly they're breeding on Jones Beach and then in Connecticut and New Jersey. And amazingly, the house finches in the East were let loose, and in 50 years covered the entire eastern part of the country because they were very adaptable. But house finches in the East are a little different. Again, they're genetically more recent, and some of the things that they do, which are very interesting, is that they have song dialects. So in New York, the New York area, they've recorded both males and females sing a lot. And they have special song dialects. In little geographic areas, they kind of sound alike. The beginning parts of their song are alike, more alike than some of the Western house finches where that doesn't always occur. So it's sort of fascinating to think about two different things. These are imported. They develop sort of differently. And, they have songs that might be different in the East and the West. And that's still, the case is out. But so many of these finches, you realize, purple finches, you sort of scratch the surface and say, oh, wait, breaking news. Purple finches now have different call types when we're talking about their calls, not their songs. Songs are different than calls. And what's going on with them? I think in doing the book and reading all the, zillions of pages of research that I did over this 2.5-year massive project that Matt and I did, you gain an appreciation about what's known and what isn't known, and how we're just scratching the surface with a lot of these finches and finding amazing things about their genetics, about their calls, about their songs. And you see certain patterns moving here, such as, what red crossbills, are they really separate species? We have Cassia crossbills, and are the same things operating in some of these other finches? Well, somewhere down the line we have purple finch, east and west, as two different species, as speciation and slow motion. Who knows? But that's the sort of underpinnings. Yeah, go
I
ahead.
approve of that message, the East and Western purple finch.
Yeah, well, we finally put it out there. I've been on that for years, and it was nice to add that to the book. They're clearly very different sounding birds. The interesting thing is, though some of the eastern birds do kind of move through California. You've heard them yourself, right, Alvaro?
I'm not sure. There's yeah, I wouldn't say for sure, but
Okay.
we did find an eastern. I remember we found in a museum a specimen of what looked to be an eastern house purple finch that was
Gotcha.
collected in California, and so they do. If it was a two species split, California would would have to be looking for this one. And they have.
Yeah.
I think they have a specimen. So yeah.
Yeah. And then I gotta say, the quick takes that Lillian, wrote are just the creative essays. They're just brilliant in my opinion. I think they're a lot of fun. And when we first kind of were thinking about, like, well, how can we kind of introduce the personality of these birds, and we were thinking about the classic bent life history accounts, which were
Oh yeah.
just, we all love those because they were like a narrative read. It was like, we're going to read about the personality of this bird. And I do think Lillian absolutely knocked that out of the park.
Well, thank you so
So,
much. Yeah, and that's what makes the
yeah.
guide unique. It's an everything guide on everything Finch. It's certainly everything that a really first-rate field guide would be, because we have all the, the range maps and the identification information and pictures of males and females and first-year birds and subspecies. But then we also add all the life history information, the conservation information, and then we have these unique touches. One of them is quick tapes, basically creative essays. They're narrative nonfiction. I said, this isn't your grandfather's field guide. It wasn't even your father's field guide. After doing 36 books, I said, my God, it's about time I did something unique and different and not boring boilerplate, field guides. So, and they're all over the map. Like Matt was saying, I used to get up at 6:30 in the morning and go downstairs with coffee and just, be in my space. And it was such a gift, to do this. And, I will say that people probably realize that a lot of people know this, but Matt is my co-author on this book. And for all the other books, my husband was my co-author. But unfortunately, during the writing of this book, he had been having issues for years with what they thought was Parkinson's disease, but he was diagnosed with bad dementia called Lewy body dementia. So, and had to go live where he's now in a dementia facility. So the therapy for me of doing something wonderful about finches and bringing to people this beautiful tale and beautiful writing. And like I said, it was an escape for me. I'd go downstairs and I'd think creatively about these amazing birds and what could I say about them to bring them to life and engage people, because people are engaged by stories. You realize, we look at field guides, we read statistics, we read measurements, but it's really stories that grab people. So those are the stories I put in. Some of them are, just kind of adventures, and some of them are really a bit off the map, such as my interview of a Lawrence's goldfinch. So as we all know, I don't know if you read that one, Alvaro, yet, but as we all know, the American Ornithological Society decided to rename birds that are named after people. So that's going to affect the book. Again, here we go, right? We've got Cassin's, Pallas, and Lawrence's goldfinch. So when it came to writing about Lawrence's goldfinch, they hadn't decided yet to change the names. But I wrote this essay anyway, and I decided to do it as an essay, as a question and answer. So I interview an imaginary Lawrence's goldfinch. And I say, so why did they call you Lawrence's goldfinch? And he goes, well, thanks for asking, but, I never really thought the name reflected, the real me. And then he goes on to, he goes on and on. And so he's quite a character. I love the picture I have of that Lawrence's goldfinch, with the Lawrence's goldfinch looking at you with its mouth open. And he got named after George Noble Lawrence, wrote Birds of North America with his buddies Baird and Cassin. And Cassin decides to name Lawrence's after his, co-author. And then in turn, the other one was called Cassin's finch. So the name is going to be changed. And when we think about the name changes and we think about, well, people, yeah, they're named after people. But I was thinking, well, what would the birds say? What do they want us to know about them? Of course, when I ask him, well, what would you like your name to be? And then he responds, greatest goldfinch of all time. You can see where this is going. So he has a lot to say. You have to read the essay.
Yeah.
But that was an example of
Right.
coming up with just off the charts, creative way to introduce people to this whole controversy and educate them about a Lawrence's goldfinch at the
It's
same
an interesting
time.
circularity. It was Casson, the one that, Casson's finch named after, is the one that named Lawrence's goldfinch
Right.
after Lawrence.
Right. And
So
then they were named a Casson, so it was like, yeah.
yeah, it's
I
the
do-
only two
It's
that,
round.
Yeah.
Round
I do
and
think
round.
that fiddleneck goldfinch would not be a bad name, like,
know.
for
I like that.
because they're so tied to that plant,
Yeah, that's
Well,
good.
and it would teach you
That's-
something about it, But
I have
hey,
to tell you something funny about that. So in part of the Lawrence's, goldfinch sort of interview, we talk about working with your co-author and how do we have fun, Matt and I, while doing the book. How is this a lot of fun for us? And we had all kinds of little ways we would, encourage ourselves and say, first of all, we call ourselves COAU, all capitals. So we use the banding code for co-author when we refer to one another.
yeah.
Another thing we had was when we got to see one another, which was never often enough, we used to enjoy a Groth Cabernet Sauvignon. So there are vineyards called
There you go.
after
California
Jeff Groth.
California. There's
Right.
Groth. It's damn good. So I discovered
It is good.
I discovered
very
it.
good.
And of course,
Yeah.
Groth is the genius who came up with the whole Crossville idea that, in fact, we should think of these birds and group them in terms of their call types rather than other characteristics. So I discovered Groth Cabernet Sauvignon, and Matt and I celebrate with Groth Cabernet Sauvignon. And then when I'm interviewing Lawrence's goldfinch, at one point I'm saying, well, tell us some more about yourself. Well, he says, I like it hot, we like it dry, and we're a bit of a foodie. We really love, fiddleneck. So I said, what does it taste like? He goes, well, it's kind of nutty with a floral overtones. It goes really well with a Groth Cabernet Sauvignon. That's in the book. So that's kind of an insight.
Easter eggs. Those little things.
Between Matt and I.
Yeah, we were, it was not a day. I mean, we signed the contract in July. It was 3 years ago. And there wasn't really a day where we weren't texting or on the phone or Zooming or in communication. I mean, as the only way you can do a book together like this, 6 hours apart, which we did do working weekends periodically. But it was, a little tricky at times because of COVID.
Mhm.
This whole thing started, the genesis was with Crossbills, August 2020, right at the beginning of the pandemic, pretty much. But yeah, it was an absolute joy to be in contact every day and, celebrate those big moments.
Absolutely.
We were very big on celebrating milestones in the book. It's the only way you kind of get. I mean,
Right.
I'm new at this. I mean, I've published a lot of papers at this point, but not a book. And it's just, it was an absolute joy to work with Lillian on
It
that.
seems easy in one respect, like you start writing something and you write it in chapters and you have an idea and you finish it off, but it's not easy at all to actually do, from my experience. So I do think you have made let's put it this way, finches are not boring, and this is not a boring book. This is a really fun book in so many ways. The maps are great, the information's great, there's quirky, funny stuff in it that allows you to learn too through the stories and the quick takes. And I just think it's a cool all around, like you said, Lillian, very different book, and that in a good way, in a very positive way, a really different kind of
And
book. And I hope we have more types of different books like this, where it's not all rote, dry. And many people I've talked to over the years talk about those old school type stories that people used to write about birds, so you could read them like a story and learn about birds, and we got totally away from that. It sort of seems like, it's time to go back a little bit more and learn through stories, It's like,
It was very intentional, this book,
yeah.
to kind of have it be something that's very interesting and
Yeah, like
not
bent, yeah.
just
Some
that.
texture.
Yeah,
Yeah.
some texture, exactly. I mean, it's and that's what gives that connection
Right.
to people, and the more connection they have to these species, the more they're going to care about it, the more they're
Sure.
going to want to preserve them, and that was something near and dear to both of us, having a social work background.
George, any thoughts? We're getting up on our time here. We don't want to, these folks probably have other books to go and write or something, or promote at this point in time.
Yeah.
But yeah, any Finchy thoughts, George, or questions?
I'm sure, like you, Al, I've got a million. Actually, I've been scribbling little questions as we go here, and I feel like I've got like 17 more. But a couple just comments I'd love to make as we get along here. One is that, Lillian, I don't know if I've mentioned to you, but Don and I actually went to the same high school, I believe.
Oh my God.
Yeah,
Wow.
which is Germantown Friends School, which has actually produced a lot of bird people. I wouldn't be surprised if it's produced like more birders / ornithologists than just about any school in the country. We could do a calendar easily, maybe a couple. But I worked in Vireo way back in the day, Visual Resources for Ornithology. So I remember which you got a number of your images, I know, from some of your early guides there. And I remember filling some of those orders. Wow. And I always looked forward to actually seeing the book and seeing which images made it in there. So I've been just admiring your work for decades and want to just say thank you for everything you've done.
Well, thank you so much. And, that you mentioned the images. One thank you I wanted to do would be to all the photographers who contributed to this book. There's about 353 photos. And again, they're the killer ID photos, which of course you have to have all the right field marks. The bird is at the side, but because it involves so much more life histories and behavior and creative essays, I was able to, I did most of the photo search with, of course, always inputting things to Matt and getting his, feedback on stuff. But I was able to work with some of the top photographers in the country, and their images are, pick out stunning images, and some of those images are full page, which is quite astounding in any book, and they illustrate a lot of things. I know in the Common Redpoll Quick Take, there's a beautiful image of these redpolls and snow, and the quote is from the beginning quote that precedes the Quick Take is from Henry David Thoreau about, these birds coming down and these beautiful crimson breast against white snow. And there is the photo. It was a Maury Reed photo that illustrates that. So I was so immensely pleased and happy to work with all those photographers, and I think it enhances the book no end and brings out the beauty of all these finches.
All those finch fanatics that help lead to the Finch Network. So it's just an amazing number of people that helped us with this. Kudos to everybody that's been part of this journey. It's been a lot of fun, a lot of work. The last 10%, Alvaro, is that last 10%. Just it never seemed like you're just moving the needle a little bit every day.
Yeah, it's like that in math, that asymptote. You're like, I thought I was finished, but it never is finished. Like it just never get to that line until suddenly you have it in your hand and you go, oh my gosh, it did finish. Yeah,
well, it did finish. Yeah. Although I will say one thing, having done so many, many books and successfully, people are saying, well, how did you, what leads to this success? And my publisher once said to me, well, you hand in well-organized manuscripts on time. And that's a biggie. This book was an enormous amount of work, and we met all the deadlines. We were killing ourselves at the end. Remember, Matt, in March? Oh my God, it was practically one, all-nighters the last weeks before we handed it in on March 1st, 2023. You just get all the words, and not to mention then after that all the photos and the maps, and then multiple rounds with copy editors and designers. And by the way, I did the layout of the book mock-ups of the layout of all the book with all the photos when I handed it in to use as a template for the designers, even though they had an initial design. So it was an immense amount of work. And as you know, anybody who's done a book, it's that work and that ability to grind through and get it done and turn it in on time that stands you apart from other people. I remember once being on a book tour, and one of the people who was worked for the organization, was my escort and got me from the airport, and we're talking books, and he goes, and I said, yeah, and this is my, 20th book or whatever. And he goes, I wrote a lot of books too. And I said, great. Who's your publisher? And he goes, well, I haven't published them. That's sort of the difference. You have to work with a publisher and then be responsible. And then, of course, what keeps you going is fear, because the minute you finish a book, you're out of a job. So you better have a successful book and then be ready to do another one. But it's been a joy, and I hope this book is a great gift to everyone and converts them all to finch lovers, whether, as Alvaro said, you had me at Finch, and all the ones that haven't been started with Finch. So yes,
and
yes.
Just to let people know, it's The Stokes Guide to Finches of the United States and Canada by Lillian Stokes and Matthew A. Young, Little and Brown, and it is coming out very soon. We will have this episode out, I think, just before it comes out. So
like a week
pre-order
before.
it. Yeah. You can go, and wherever you buy books and go, I need this book. I need 10 of them right away, because I got to give them away for Christmas that's coming up, right?
I love it. Yep.
But otherwise, I just want to say thank you so much. It's to have two people of your caliber talking to us is just such an honor, and to be able to talk about a book that is just fantastic is also super fun. And I've enjoyed it immensely to have you on Lifeless today. And thank you so much, George. Any words too?
I just want to say thank you also, but I'll call you by your 4-letter codes. So that'll be Lillian is List, and Matt, you'll be Mayo. So
Mayo.
Nice. Nice. Thank you for having us on, guys.
Okay, thank you.
And Molly too. I mean, Molly set this up too as well.
Yeah.
So
yeah, she couldn't be here today, but there you go. Right. Thanks so much. And we will see you next time, everybody. Bye-bye.
Cheers, everybody.